had a little coughing spell there. I'm sorry. That's one of the things about doing these videos is you have to stop it when you have to cough. The criticisms of qualitative analysis, it's subjective. We talked about that already. It's unique in that it can't be replicated. And when you get, the farther away you get from an event, the more people's memories of it change. Certain things they forget, certain things they may modify even in their memory. So the farther you get away from an event, the more difficult it is to really chronicle. And so it can be really hard to get a consistent picture of what's going on. Also, like I said, it's anecdotal. It's a one-time thing. It's really not something that you can generalize to the whole population. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to look at another example of qualitative research. And this example is the article, What Did She Say? And it's there for you to see. It's an article on Blackboard that you can look at. I want to look at this one because this is a good example of qualitative research. As you can see from the article, it's from the International Institute for Qualitative Methodology. This is an article that got published not because of its findings as much as it is because of its methodology. And I'll just, you can read through it and I'll just give you sort of a background of what they're doing, and then we'll look at the data a little bit. What was happening with this article, this is from the United Kingdom, from Great Britain, and they do this in this country as well. If you, say, are running an emergency room, or you're working in the court system, or you're working in like the license bureau or someplace like that, if you have somebody who walks in who doesn't speak English as a native language, you can call a service which will send you an interpreter, a lay volunteer interpreter. A lay volunteer interpreter, which this article will call an LVI, a lay volunteer. And that volunteer then will help you to interpret and to talk to this person for whom English is a second language. Now, this is used all over the world and across the country, especially the United States, in things, like I said, emergency rooms and things like that. And what this article did was it tried to come up with a way to measure the accuracy of those volunteers. And what was happening was this. These people were working with a hospital, a women's hospital in Great Britain, where women were coming to have babies. And the doctors, when they got a woman who didn't speak English, they would call for a lay volunteer, and the volunteer would come. And the doctors noticed that sometimes they would ask a question, and the lay volunteer would relay the question to the woman in her native language. She would reply, and then the lay volunteer would give the response, and the response really didn't have anything to do with the question the doctor asked. So the doctors were wondering, are the lay volunteers interpreting the questions accurately? That was the first thing. The second thing they noticed was sometimes they would ask a question, the lay volunteer would talk to the patient in their native language, and they would talk back and forth. And then the lay volunteer would give the answer. And the doctor was wondering, are they talking about the question? Are they talking about something else? Is the lay volunteer clarifying the question? What am I missing there? The third thing that they noticed was sometimes the doctors would ask a question, the lay volunteer would relay it to the patient, and the lay volunteer, the patient, excuse me, would give a really long answer. And the lay volunteer would turn to the doctor and say, she said no. And so the doctor's wondering, what was all of that I missed? And so they wanted to check the accuracy of these lay volunteers. So in this article, you can see they have a diagram of the process that they're looking at. Let's see if I can get over there to it. Here it is. They have this chart where they have the researcher or the doctor, the interpreter in the middle, and the patient. And so you've got the doctor asks a question, the interpreter asks the patient gives an answer, and the answer comes back to the doctor. So depending upon how good this interpreter is, the communication between the doctor and the patient could be in trouble. So they set up an experiment where they were going to give the researcher or the doctor a set of questions to ask. They would have lay volunteers come in, and they would have patients volunteer to take part in this. And the researcher would ask the same questions, and the lay volunteers would relay those and give the answers back. and that would all be audio recorded. And then they would have a professional interpreter, someone who did this for a job, for a living. The professional interpreter, they call it PIs, I think, in this article, listen to the audio tapes and tell what really was said by both the interpreter and the participant or the patient in that other language. And so the article describes how they did it, all the information that was transcribed and all that kind of stuff. We get down here to the results, and we see that the first step was the professional interpreter's interpretation of the lay volunteer's question. Is the lay volunteer relaying the question accurately to the patient? And you can see the results over here. The results, the first result says, the researcher's question, do you have any special foods in Poland that a woman after having her baby should eat or drink? And the professional interpreter's interpretation of the question posed by the lay volunteer is, do you have any special food in Poland what women after having baby eat it? Well, that's very close. The question is very close. So that one probably passed. But the next one on the next page, I'm on page 260 now. The next one's a little different. The question is, can she tell us about the care she received when she was in the hospital after she had her baby? The professional interpretation of the question posed by the lay volunteer, what did you learn in the hospital regarding to taking care of your baby to looking after your baby? Now those are very different questions, okay? And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the accuracy of the lay volunteer. The next step, and we'll just go through one more and then we'll move on to something else. In the next step, they ask the professional interpreter to look at the answer that was given and see if the answer that was given matched what the lay volunteer said. Did the lay volunteer get the answer right? Here's the first one. Why do you prefer an individual room? The lay volunteer's interpretation of the answer, because she could, like a real peace, she could relax or sleep. The professional interpreter said that the woman said, because she could relax, I could probably better relax, and it was a bigger room. So very similar kind of responses. Here though, on the next page, you get into some of the things that maybe aren't particularly the same. At the bottom of page 261, the researcher's question, so was the midwife telling her and teaching her how to deal with the baby? The response that the lay volunteer, this is what the lay volunteer says the woman said. Yes, they showed her how to hold the baby. She thinks it was good. But what the professional interpreter said the woman really said was, yes, she showed her how to hold her, but she doesn't think it was good because in her opinion, her midwife told her she could hold the baby like a doll, and she thinks the baby is so weak and so small that she couldn't hold her how she showed it to her. So the lay volunteer said the woman thought her care was good. The midwife did a good job. The professional interpreter said, the woman said the midwife did not do a good job. And you could go on and read this. My point being, these quotes are the data. Most of the time people, when they think of data, they think of numbers and that sort of thing. But this is the data that's being used. And the reason this article was published, as I said, was because of this notion of using professional volunteers and audio tapes to check on the accuracy of lay volunteers. So that was the whole point of that article being published. But that is a qualitative research article, okay? Now, what we want to look at next is we want to look at an example of a review of literature paper, the type of paper that you are going to be writing for me. We want to look at an actual example of that. It's the article on gender, and it's in the Blackboard website, so you can download that and look at that. The next segment will look at that article, and it's important because this is the type of paper you're going to write for me. Okay,